My name is Gemma, and I am 32 years old. All my life I tried to be the perfect daughter, the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble or asked for anything. That is, until that Sunday dinner when my parents casually laughed and announced my sister would just stay at my place for a while. I stood up, hands trembling, and said, "Funny, I have not lived there for 6 weeks." The room fell silent. My mom's voice cracked as she asked, "Wait then. Where exactly have you been staying?" Before I tell you how my family fell apart that night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and subscribe to hear what happened when my family finally realized they never really knew me at all. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. From the time I could tie my own shoes, my parents expected me to handle things on my own. My sister Zoe, on the other hand, was 3 years younger and treated like she was made of glass. When she cried, my parents rushed to comfort her. When I cried, I was told to be strong and set a good example. "Gemma can handle it" became my parents' favorite phrase. School project, Gemma can handle it. College applications, Gemma can handle it. Finding an apartment and establishing a career with no financial help, Gemma can handle it. And I did handle it. I worked through college while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. I secured an entry-level position at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago, and slowly worked my way up over 7 years. I found a small but nice one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park that I could just barely afford if I was careful with my budget. It was mine, earned through countless overtime hours and sacrificed weekends. Every month when I paid rent, I felt a mixture of pride and resentment. Pride because I had done this completely on my own. Resentment because my sister had lived at home until she was 26 with my parents covering her bills while she found herself. They even helped with the down payment on her condo when she finally moved out last year. "Your sister is more sensitive than you," my mother would say whenever I pointed out the disparity. "You have always been so independent, Gemma." Independent wasn't a choice. It was an expectation placed on me since childhood. A role I had to fill because no one offered me another option. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. Our company lost a major client and layoffs were announced. Despite my years of dedication and consistent performance reviews, I was among the first to go. Last in, first out, they said, even though that wasn't true in my case. The truth was that I didn't have the personal connections that others had cultivated while I was working late. I received 2 weeks of severance pay. It covered exactly 1 rent payment and some groceries. I immediately began applying for jobs, certain that with my experience I would find something quickly. I was wrong. The market was saturated with marketing professionals from various companies that had also downsized. Each day brought more rejection emails, or worse, silence. My savings, which had never been substantial, dwindled rapidly. When the first of the month came around and I couldn't make rent, I had to make a choice. I could tell my family and ask for help, or I could handle it on my own as I always had. Pride won out. I packed what I could fit into my Honda Civic, gave notice to my landlord, and prepared to live in my car until I found another job. "It will just be for a week or two," I told myself, as I organized the trunk to make room for my clothes and toiletries. "No one needs to know." I kept my gym membership active so I would have a place to shower. I found safe parking spots to sleep in. I maintained my appearance meticulously, making sure no one could tell that I was homeless. I set up a virtual mailbox service for job applications. I used library computers to send resumes and take online interviews. And every Sunday, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs for dinner, just as I had done for years. I arrived well-dressed with stories about work and friends that were entirely fabricated. I listened to my parents praise Zoe for her latest minor accomplishment. I smiled and played my part. The dinners became both a lifeline and a source of growing resentment. They provided me with a good meal and a few hours in a real home once a week. But each time I became more angry at how oblivious my family was to my struggle. Not once did they ask how I was really doing. Not once did they notice the dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Not once did they question why I always arrived exactly on time for dinner and left promptly after dessert. 6 Sundays passed this way. 6 dinners where I smiled through gritted teeth as my mother asked Zoe detailed questions about her life, while only asking me, "How's work?" before moving on without waiting for a real answer. 6 evenings of my father patting Zoe on the shoulder proudly while barely acknowledging my presence. The resentment built inside me like pressure in a sealed container. Each dismissal, each moment of preferential treatment toward my sister, each casual assumption that I was fine because I was always fine added to it. I began to wonder if they would even notice if I stopped coming to dinner altogether. Would they call to check on me? Or would they just shrug and say, "That's Gemma, always independent"? The worst part was knowing that if I told them the truth, their response would likely be disappointment rather than support. My mother would sigh dramatically and say something about how she thought I was more responsible than this. My father would offer reluctant financial help accompanied by a lecture about proper planning. Zoe would look at me with pity, her expression saying, "I never thought you would fail." So I continued the charade, sleeping in parking lots and rest stops, washing my hair in gym sinks, applying for jobs from my laptop in coffee shops, and pretending everything was fine during those Sunday dinners. I was handling it just as I had always been expected to do. But inside, something was breaking. The Gemma, who had always risen to meet expectations, who had shaped her entire identity around being the capable one, was crumbling under the weight of reality. I wasn't handling it. I was barely surviving. And no one, not one person in my family had any idea. That Sunday began like any other day in my new reality. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning when the sun started to heat up my car beyond comfortable sleeping temperature. I had parked in the lot behind a 24-hour supermarket, a spot I'd found to be relatively safe and undisturbed by security. I folded my blanket neatly and tucked it under the passenger seat along with my pillow. I gathered my toiletry bag and a fresh outfit from the organized chaos of my back seat. At 6, when the gym opened, I was first in line. I showered, brushed my teeth, and applied makeup carefully, ensuring I looked put together despite having slept in a reclined driver's seat. By 9, I was sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop sending out another batch of job applications. Each cover letter was personalized, each resume tailored to the specific position. I had become efficient at this daily ritual, though the constant rejections made it feel increasingly futile. At 3, I began preparing for dinner at my parents'. I changed into a nicer outfit in a public restroom, a dark blue dress that my mother had always complimented. I stopped at a florist and bought a small bunch of daisies, not because I wanted to, but because arriving empty-handed felt wrong. The drive to the suburbs took 45 minutes. As always, I timed my arrival perfectly for 5 o'clock. Not early enough to have to make extended conversation, not late enough to be criticized for delaying dinner. My mother answered the door with flour on her apron. "Oh, you're here," she said, as if my consistent punctuality was surprising. "Zoe just called. She's running 15 minutes late." Of course she was. And of course it was fine. If I had been 15 minutes late, there would have been passive-aggressive comments throughout dinner about consideration for others' time. "I made lasagna," my mother continued as I followed her to the kitchen. Zoe's favorite. It had been Zoe's favorite for 30 years. Just once I wished my mother would make my favorite meal, but she probably didn't even know what it was. For the record, it's chicken pot pie with extra thyme. My father was in the living room watching a football game. He grunted a greeting without looking away from the screen. I placed the daisies on the coffee table near him. "Those for your mother?" he asked, finally glancing at me. "Yes," I replied, though they had been for both of them. "Nice," he said, attention already back on the game. I went to the kitchen to help my mother as I always did. She handed me plates to set the table, talking the entire time about Zoe's latest achievement, a small promotion at the clothing boutique where she worked. "Assistant manager now," my mother said proudly. "And they're giving her business cards. Real business cards with her name on them." I nodded and smiled, not mentioning that I had had business cards for years at my previous job. or that assistant manager at a boutique was hardly comparable to my former position as marketing strategist for national campaigns. But those comparisons weren't fair, I reminded myself. Zoe was doing her best. It wasn't her fault our parents had different standards for us. The doorbell rang at 5:20 and my mother rushed to answer it, abandoning the salad she'd been asking me to help with. I heard Zoe's voice animated and loud, followed by my father's enthusiastic greeting. By the time they entered the kitchen, the three of them were laughing about something. "Gemma," Zoe said, giving me a quick hug. "You look nice. That dress brings out your eyes." I thanked her, noting that she was wearing jeans and a casual top. I was perpetually overdressed for these dinners, another sign of trying too hard that no one seemed to notice. We sat down to eat, and the conversation immediately centered on Zoe. Her promotion. Her recent date with a new guy that hadn't gone well. Her thoughts about maybe taking a photography class. Her complaints about a difficult customer at the boutique. I ate quietly, offering appropriate responses when directly addressed, which wasn't often. The lasagna was good, but it sat heavily in my stomach, mixing with the anxiety that had become my constant companion. So my mother said during a rare lull in the conversation, "Zoe has some news." Zoe looked down at her plate, suddenly less animated. "It's not a big deal, Mom." "Of course it is, honey. Family helps family." My mother patted Zoe's hand. Zoe and Mark broke up. Mark was the boyfriend Zoe had been living with for the past 8 months. This was the first I'd heard of any trouble between them. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "It's for the best," Zoe shrugged. "But he's keeping the apartment since it's closer to his work, so I need to find a new place." I felt a tingle of warning at the back of my neck. "Which brings us to the favor," my mother continued. "It will just be for a little while, until Zoe finds her own place." My father joined in. "We were thinking, since you have that spare bedroom in your apartment." They hadn't even asked it as a question. There was no spare bedroom in my one-bedroom apartment. Zoe had visited once, shortly after I moved in. Had she forgotten? Had they all forgotten? "We know it's an imposition," my mother continued, "but family helps family. And it would just be for a month or two." A month or two? In an apartment I no longer had. With what money, on what bed? My father chuckled, "Plus Zoe can help with the rent. That Lincoln Park place of yours isn't cheap." They were still talking as if my life was exactly as it had been 6 weeks ago. As if nothing had changed. As if they actually knew anything about my reality. The pressure that had been building for weeks suddenly reached its breaking point. 6 weeks of sleeping in my car. 6 weeks of showering at the gym. 6 weeks of pretending everything was fine while my life fell apart. 6 weeks of them not noticing anything was wrong. My parents were still laughing softly, making plans for Zoe to move in with me that weekend when I stood up. "Funny," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I haven't lived there for 6 weeks." The laughter died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in confusion. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his brow furrowed. "I lost my job 6 weeks ago. I couldn't afford rent. I had to give up my apartment." Each sentence was like a weight lifting from my shoulders. "But," my mother's voice trembled, "where exactly have you been staying?" The silence that followed my mother's question seemed to stretch into eternity. I looked at their faces one by one. My father's confusion. My mother's dawning horror. Zoe's uncomfortable shift in her chair. "My car," I finally said. "I've been living in my car for the past 6 weeks." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture so melodramatic it would have been comical in any other situation. "That's ridiculous," my father said, his voice gruff. "Why would you do that when you could have just come home?" The question ignited something in me. Could I have really? Because not once in the past 10 years have you suggested that this was still my home. Not once have you offered me the kind of support you've given Zoe at every turn. "That's not fair," my mother interjected. "We've always supported both of you equally." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "Equally, Mom, you paid Zoe's rent until she was 26. You helped her with the down payment on her condo. You've bailed her out of credit card debt twice that I know of. Meanwhile, I worked through college, took out student loans that I'm still paying off, and have received exactly zero financial help since I turned 18. We helped you with college, my father protested weakly. You paid for 1 semester of books. 1. I paid for everything else myself. My mother was crying now, tears streaking her makeup. Why didn't you tell us you were in trouble? We would have helped. Would you have lectured me about responsibility and proper planning? Would you have sighed and wondered aloud how I could have let this happen? Would you have told all your friends about how your responsible daughter turned out? To be a disappointment after all. Zoe spoke up for the first time. Gemma, that's not fair. Mom and Dad love you. I turned to her. This isn't about love, Zoe. It's about expectations and double standards. It's about how I've been treated my entire life versus how you've been treated. It's about how they call you twice a day to check in but didn't notice that I've been homeless for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Zoe. Where do you think I've been showering? Where do you think I've been sleeping? How do you think it feels to come here every Sunday and listen to everyone talk about your promotion at a boutique when I lost a career? I spent 7 years building. We didn't know, my father said, his voice softer now. That's exactly the problem. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't know because you've never been interested in my life beyond the surface level. You didn't know because it's always been easier to assume I'm fine, that I can handle everything while you focus all your attention and concern on Zoe. That's not true, my mother sobbed. We've always been so proud of you. Proud of what exactly? Can you name one accomplishment of mine from the past year? Can you tell me what my last big project at work was? Can you tell me who my friends are? What I do in my free time? Anything substantive about my life at all? The silence that followed was answer enough. Do you remember when I made honor roll every semester in high school? I continued, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened. Zoe brought home 1A, and you took her out for ice cream to celebrate. I brought home straight A's, and you said, "That's what we expect from you, Gemma." My father shifted uncomfortably. We never meant to make you feel less important. But you did. Every time you dropped everything to attend Zoe's school events but told me you couldn't make mine because of work. Every time you spent hours helping Zoe with homework but told me I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. Every time you praised her for tiny achievements while taking mine for granted. Memories flooded back, sharp and painful. Remember my college graduation? You showed up an hour late because Zoe had a minor fender bender that morning. She wasn't hurt, the car had a small dent, but that was more important than being on time to see me graduate summa cum laude. That's not what happened, my mother protested weakly. It is exactly what happened. Just like when I got my promotion 2 years ago and told you at Sunday dinner, and you changed the subject to Zoe's new haircut. Or when I ran that marathon last year and you forgot it was happening even though I'd been talking about it for months. My father's face had grown increasingly red. You're exaggerating. We've always treated you both the same. Dad, I have been sleeping in my car for 6 weeks. I've been coming here every Sunday, and not one of you noticed anything was wrong. How is that treating us the same? You should have told us, he exploded, pounding his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. How are we supposed to know if you didn't say anything? You've always been independent, always handled things yourself. We respected that about you. It wasn't respect, I said quietly. It was convenience. It was easier to assume I was fine than to actually pay attention and notice I wasn't. It was easier to focus all your energy on Zoe because she demanded it while I did what I was taught to do from childhood, handle it myself and never complain. My mother was sobbing openly now. I can't believe you've been living in your car. My daughter homeless. What will people think? And there it was. Not concern for my well-being, but concern for appearances. How this would reflect on her. That's all you care about, isn't it? What people will think. Not the fact that I've been struggling. Not the fact that I've been alone through the hardest time in my life. Just how it makes you look. That's not what I meant, she backtracked. It's exactly what you meant. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I need some air. Don't you walk out of this house, young lady, my father commanded, his voice, sharp with authority that had worked on me for decades. But not tonight. I'm 32 years old, Dad. I'm not a young lady you can order around. And this stopped feeling like a home to me a long time ago. I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back. In the driveway, I got into my car, my home for the past 6 weeks, and finally let myself cry. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that I'd been holding back for so long. I cried for the little girl who had always tried so hard to be what her parents wanted. I cried for the woman who had lost everything and been too proud to ask for help. I cried for the family dynamics that had brought us to this point. Through the windows of the house, I could see them still at the dining table, gesturing and talking animatedly. My mother was still crying. My father looked angry. Zoe sat with her head down. They were probably talking about me, about my ingratitude, about how I had ruined a perfectly nice family dinner with my outburst. Or maybe, just maybe, they were finally seeing the truth. The week that followed was one of the hardest of my life. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my family, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What more was there to say? I had finally told them the truth, and their reactions had only confirmed what I'd always suspected: they didn't really know me at all. My mother's texts alternated between guilt trips. I cried all night thinking about you in that car, and demands, "Call me right now, young lady." My father left gruff voicemails ordering me to stop this nonsense and come home. Zoe's messages were gentler, asking if I was okay and where I was staying, but I couldn't respond to her either. Not yet. Meanwhile, my situation was getting worse. The emotional toll of the confrontation had affected my job search. I was too drained to put on a convincing facade during interviews. I started showing up late to virtual meetings because I'd overslept in my uncomfortable car. My appearance, which I'd maintained so carefully, began to slip as depression took hold. My funds were nearly depleted. I had less than $100 to my name, which needed to cover gas, food, and the gym membership that provided my only access to a shower. I started skipping meals, eating once a day from the dollar menu at fast food restaurants. I canceled streaming subscriptions that had been my only entertainment during long, lonely nights in the car. 10 days after the family dinner, a severe thunderstorm hit Chicago. I was parked in what I thought was a safe spot, but around 2 in the morning, I woke to water seeping into the car. The street had flooded, and water was coming in through the door seals. In a panic, I started the engine and tried to move to higher ground, but it was too late. Water had reached the engine, and the car sputtered and died. I grabbed my laptop phone and the folder containing my important documents and waded through knee-deep water to the sidewalk. I stood there in the pouring rain, watching as water filled my car, my home, taking with it most of my remaining possessions. My clothes, my toiletries, the family photos I'd kept, all ruined. I had nowhere to go, no one to call who wouldn't say "I told you so." So I walked. In the rain, in the middle of the night, I walked until I found an all-night laundromat. I sat in a plastic chair, soaking wet, clutching my laptop bag to my chest until morning. When the rain stopped, I returned to my car. It was a total loss. Water had risen to the seats, soaking everything. The insurance would cover the car eventually, but the process would take weeks, and they wouldn't cover the personal items lost. Not that insurance mattered at this point. The car had been paid off years ago, but any money from the claim would take time I didn't have. I spent that day in a daze, moving between coffee shops and public libraries, trying to figure out what to do next. By evening, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I found myself sitting on a bench in a small park, no plan, no shelter for the night. That's where Officer Bryant found me. She was doing her rounds, checking the park before closing time, when she spotted me still in damp clothes, staring blankly ahead. "Ma'am, the park closes at 9. You'll need to move along," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. I looked up at her, and something in my expression must have concerned her because her demeanor changed. "Are you all right? Do you need medical assistance?" I shook my head. "I'm fine. Just nowhere to go." She sat down beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. How long have you been homeless? The word hit me like a physical blow. Homeless. Despite living in my car for weeks, I had never fully applied that label to myself. I had been between apartments, or in a temporary situation. But now, with no car, no shelter of any kind, the reality was unavoidable. My car flooded last night, I said, my voice hollow. I've been living in it for about 7 weeks. Now I have nothing. Officer Bryant nodded, no judgment in her expression. There's a women's shelter about 20 minutes from here. They might have a bed available. Would you like me to call? And check? Pride, that destructive force that had kept me from asking for help for so long, reared up again. I almost said no. Almost told her I would figure it out on my own as I always had. But I was tired. So very tired of handling everything alone. Yes, I whispered. Please. She made the call, confirming they had space, then offered me a ride. The shelter was called New Beginnings, a name that felt both hopeful and devastating as we pulled up to the nondescript building. Inside, a woman named Lucia helped me check in, asking questions about my situation with a gentle directness that broke through my remaining defenses. When she asked if I had family I could contact, I broke down, completely sobbing as I tried to explain the complicated dynamics that had left me feeling unable to turn to them. Family isn't always what we need in crisis, Lucia said, handing me a tissue. Sometimes we need strangers who can see us clearly without the baggage of history. She showed me to a small bed in a room shared with 3 other women. It wasn't private, it wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and dry and safe. She gave me toiletries, a clean towel, and a set of donated clothes that actually fit. That night, lying on a narrow bed in a room with strangers, I hit rock bottom. Not because of where I was, but because I finally acknowledged how far I had fallen. I had gone from a successful marketing professional with an apartment in Lincoln Park to a homeless woman in a shelter, all because I had been too proud to ask for help, too conditioned to believe I had to handle everything alone. In the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other women breathing, some crying softly, some talking in their sleep, I faced the truth, the identity I had built for myself. The capable, independent Gemma who could handle anything was a facade. Underneath was a wounded child still desperate for her parents' attention, and approval still hurt by years of being taken for granted. The next morning, I met with a social worker named Diane. She helped me apply for emergency assistance, gave me information about job placement programs, and connected me with resources I hadn't known existed. You're not the typical client we see here, she said carefully. You have education, work experience skills that are in demand. This is a temporary setback, not a life sentence. Her words were meant to be encouraging, but they made me think about the other women at the shelter. What made my homelessness temporary while theirs might be a life sentence? Was it just my privilege, my education, my past prosperity? The thought was humbling. Over the next few days, I met some of those women. Maria, who had fled domestic violence with nothing but her children and the clothes on their backs. Tanya, whose mental illness had gone untreated until she lost her job, her apartment, and her support system. Eleanor, an elderly woman whose fixed income hadn't kept pace with rising rents. Their stories put my own situation into perspective. Yes, I had been treated unfairly by my family. Yes, I had faced bad luck and hardship. But I also had advantages. Many of these women had never had education, work experience, good health, no dependents. For the first time in my life, I truly understood the concept of privilege, not as an abstract idea, but as a tangible reality. And with that understanding came a sense of responsibility, not to handle it as I always had, but to accept help now so that someday I could offer help to others. My first night in a real bed after weeks in the car was a mixture of relief and profound sadness. Relief at the basic comfort, at not having to stay alert for danger, at being able to stretch out fully. Sadness at how far things had fallen, at the realization that I had no idea when or if I would have a place of my own again. But as I drifted off to sleep, one thought provided a small measure of comfort. At least now I wasn't pretending anymore. For better or worse, the truth was out. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward something better. 2 weeks into my stay at New Beginnings, I was sitting in the common area filling out job applications when Lucia approached me. "Gemma, you have a visitor," she said. I looked up startled. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. My first thought was that it might be Officer Bryant checking in as she had done once before. But when I walked to the reception area, it was Zoe who stood there looking uncertain and out of place in her designer jeans and cashmere sweater. "How did you find me?" I asked, too surprised to manage a greeting. "I've been looking everywhere," she said. "I called hospitals, checked with the police. Finally, an officer named Bryant told me you might be here." She hesitated. "Can we talk? Maybe go for a coffee or something?" Part of me wanted to refuse to protect myself from more hurt. But there was something in her expression of vulnerability I rarely saw in my confident younger sister that made me nod. We walked to a small coffee shop, 2 blocks from the shelter. After ordering, we sat at a corner table, an awkward silence stretching between us. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here," Zoe finally said. "They think I'm at work." "Why the secrecy?" She sighed. "Because I wanted to talk to you first, without their drama. They've been a mess since that dinner. Mom cries all the time. Dad is angry, but won't admit he's really scared. They keep trying to figure out where you might be staying, but they're looking in all the wrong places. Hotels, friends' houses, even extended stay motels. It never occurred to them that you might be in a shelter. It never occurred to me either until recently, I admitted. "Gemma, I am so sorry." Zoe's eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea things were so unbalanced between us. I never saw it." "Why would you? You were the beneficiary." "That's not fair. I didn't ask to be treated differently." "Didn't you, all those times you called them for money, for help, for emotional support? All those times you let them bail you out of situations I had to handle on my own?" Zoe looked down at her coffee. "I never thought about it that way. I just thought, that's what parents are for. To help when you need it. For you, maybe. Not for me. I see that now. And I feel terrible. Not just because of what happened to you, but because I've been part of the problem. I've taken their help for granted while you've been struggling alone." The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the self-centered Zoe I was accustomed to. This was someone genuinely confronting an uncomfortable truth about herself and our family. "I've been looking for you every day," she continued, "driving around the city checking places you might be. I was so worried." "Why, you've never worried about me before." She winced. "I deserve that. But it's not entirely true. I've always admired you, Gemma. You seemed so put together, so capable. I never thought you needed anything from anyone. I certainly never thought you needed me." The irony wasn't lost on me. My competence, the very quality that had made my parents neglect me, had also created distance between my sister and me. "What happened with your car?" Zoe asked. "Your text said something about a flood?" I explained about the thunderstorm, the flooded street, losing most of my possessions. As I talked, I realized it was the first time in years I had shared a genuine problem with my sister without minimizing or putting on a brave face. "That's awful," she said when I finished. "What are you going to do now?" "Keep looking for jobs. Stay at the shelter until I can afford a place. Start over, I guess." Zoe took a deep breath. "I have a suggestion, but promise you won't immediately say no. Come stay with me." "What, you don't have a place? You broke up with Mark, remember? That's what started this whole mess." "I do have a place. I never moved in with Mark. That was just something Mom and Dad assumed, and I never corrected them." She looked embarrassed. "I've had my own apartment for 3 months. It's small, just a studio in Wicker Park, but the couch pulls out. You could stay until you get back on your feet." I stared at her, trying to process this information. "You lied about living with Mark. Why?" "Because I was embarrassed. We dated for 8 months but never moved in together because he didn't want to commit. When we broke up, it was easier to let Mom and Dad think we had been living together than admit the truth." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Apparently, dishonesty runs in the family. I wasn't dishonest, I protested. I just didn't tell them everything. Neither did I. That's kind of my point. We've both been playing roles in this family. You're the capable one who never needs help. I'm the fragile one who always needs rescuing. Neither is the whole truth. I considered her offer. Staying with Zoe would be a step up from the shelter, but it also meant becoming vulnerable with someone I had always competed with, someone I wasn't sure I could trust. I don't know, Zoe. We've never been close. We might kill each other in a small space. Probably, she agreed with surprising candor. But it would be better than a shelter, wouldn't it? And maybe it's time we got to know each other as adults, not just as the roles we were assigned as kids. Her words echoed my own recent realizations. We had both been playing parts in our family dynamic for so long, neither of us really knew who the other was beneath those roles. Mom and Dad don't know about your apartment number, and they don't need to know you're staying with me either. Not until you're ready to deal with them. The offer of space of time to heal before confronting my parents was tempting. But pride, that old enemy, rose up again. I don't want charity, Zoe. Not even from you. It's not charity, it's family. She reached across the table to touch my hand. Real family, not the dysfunctional version we've been living with. Let me help you, not because you need it, but because I want to. Because that's what sisters should do for each other. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the perfect makeup and trendy clothes was a woman trying to make amends, to build a bridge across years of inequity and distance. Okay, I said finally, but I'll contribute as soon as I can. And this is temporary. Of course, she agreed quickly. Totally temporary. That afternoon, I packed my few remaining possessions from the shelter, thanked Lucia and Diane for their help, and followed Zoe to her apartment. It was indeed small, a converted loft space with high ceilings and exposed brick, furnished with an eclectic mix of thrift store finds and a few expensive pieces. The promised pull-out couch looked reasonably comfortable. Make yourself at home, Zoe said, showing me where to put my things. Bathroom's through there. Kitchen's basically just that counter with the microwave and mini fridge, but it works. As I settled in, Zoe busied herself making tea, chattering nervously about her job at the boutique, her photography hobby, a documentary she'd watched recently. It was awkward, this new dynamic between us, but there was also something refreshing about it. Without our parents as an audience, without the established patterns of our relationship, we were finding our way to a new kind of sisterhood. That evening, over takeout Thai food, Zoe surprised me again. I have a friend who works at Digital Edge Marketing, she said casually. They're looking for someone with experience in campaign strategy. I mentioned you, and she said to send your resume directly to her. I nearly choked on my pad thigh. You did what? When? Last week when I was looking for you, I figured you'd need a job, and Sarah's always complaining about how hard it is to find people with real experience. She shrugged as if it was no big deal. I sent her your LinkedIn profile. Hope that's okay. It was more than okay. Digital Edge was a respected firm, smaller than my previous employer, but known for innovative campaigns and a positive work culture. It was exactly the kind of place I had been trying to get an interview with. Zoe, I thank you. That's incredibly thoughtful. She smiled, a genuine smile without the competitive edge I was used to seeing. That's what sisters do, right? Look out for each other. As we ate and talked, I began to see glimpses of a Zoe I hadn't known existed. She was funny and insightful, with a sharp eye for detail that served her well in both retail and photography. She spoke about her own struggles with our parents' expectations, how the role of the fragile one had become a cage she didn't know how to escape. They still treat me like I'm 16, she complained. Dad tried to talk me out of renewing my lease because he thinks living alone is too much responsibility for me. I'm 29, for God's sake. At least they care enough to worry, I countered. It's not worry, it's control. They don't think I can make good decisions, so they try to make them for me. It's suffocating. I saw then that the preferential treatment I had resented came with its own price. Zoe had been infantilized, her independence stunted by our parents' constant intervention. While I had been forced to be too independent too soon, she had never been allowed to develop independence at all. We were both victims of our parents' unbalanced approach, just in different ways. The realization didn't erase years of hurt, but it did help me see my sister with new empathy. That night, lying on the pull-out couch, listening to Zoe's soft breathing from the bed on the other side of the small apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Not just for a job or a place to live, but for a relationship with my sister that might become something meaningful, something healing for both of us. It wasn't a solution to all my problems. I still had no home of my own, no job, no financial security. I still had to face my parents eventually. But for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone in the struggle. And that, small as it was, felt like a turning point. The interview with Digital Edge went better than I could have hoped. Sarah, Zoe's friend, turned out to be the creative director, a position with significant influence in hiring decisions. She was impressed by my portfolio and experience, and 2 days after the interview, I received a job offer. The salary was slightly less than my previous position, but the company offered better benefits, including mental health coverage that would help me address the anxiety and depression that had intensified during my homelessness. Living with Zoe was challenging at times. Her sleep schedule was erratic, her housekeeping questionable, and her tendency to borrow my clothes without asking hadn't changed since childhood. But there were good moments too. Late-night conversations about our shared childhood seen through different perspectives. Movie marathons on weekends. Cooking lessons where I taught her basic skills our mother had never bothered to share with her. We established a routine. I took the early shower, made coffee, and was usually out the door by 7:30. Zoe rarely woke before 9, working later shifts at the boutique. Evenings were our time together, debriefing our days over whatever simple meal I had prepared or takeout Zoe had brought home. With my first paycheck, I insisted on contributing to rent and utilities. With the second, I opened a new savings account, determined never to be financially vulnerable again. By the third month, I had enough set aside to start looking for my own place, though I was in no rush. Despite our occasional friction, Zoe and I had found a comfortable rhythm in our shared space. Throughout this time, our parents continued to call and text. I responded minimally, letting them know I was safe, but giving no details about where I was staying or working. Zoe maintained the charade that she knew nothing about my whereabouts, a deception that weighed on her more than I had expected. "I hate lying to them," she confessed one evening. "Mom called today crying, saying she's afraid you're living on the streets. It feels wrong not to tell her you're okay, that you're here." "I am okay now," I acknowledged. "But I wasn't for a long time, and they never noticed. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine just to make them feel better." But as weeks turned into months, I began to see the toll our estrangement was taking, not just on our parents, but on Zoe as well. She was caught in the middle, keeping my secrets while witnessing our parents' genuine distress. At Zoe's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist using my new insurance. Dr. Reynolds specialized in family dynamics and helped me process not just the recent trauma of homelessness, but the deeper wounds of childhood. She didn't push me to reconcile with my parents, but she did encourage me to consider what kind of relationship I wanted with them moving forward. "Complete estrangement is an option," she said during one session, "but it comes with its own cost. The question is whether that cost is worth the protection it provides." I thought about her words for days afterward. What did I want from my parents? Not the unquestioning support they had given Zoe, certainly. That time had passed. But perhaps something more honest. A relationship based on who we really were, not the roles we had been playing for decades. 2 months after moving in with Zoe, nearly 5 months after that fateful dinner, I decided it was time to face my parents. Zoe offered to be there, but I felt this was something I needed to do myself with the new strength I had found. I suggested meeting at a restaurant-neutral territory where no one could storm off to another room or fall back on familiar patterns tied to the family home. I chose a small Italian place downtown, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes but quiet enough for serious conversation. They arrived together looking older than I remembered. My mother had lost weight, dark circles under her eyes despite careful makeup. My father's posture was less commanding, his shoulders slightly stooped. They spotted me at the corner table and rushed over my mother, reaching to embrace me before stopping herself, uncertain of my response. "Gemma," she said, her voice breaking, "you look well." "I am well," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. "Thank you for coming." "Of course we came," my father said gruffly. "We've been worried sick. Where have you been staying? Zoe swears she doesn't know, but we thought—" "I'm not here to be interrogated," I interrupted. "I'm here to talk about our relationship and what happens next." My mother wiped away a tear. "We've been so worried. All these months not knowing if you were safe. I understand that you've been worried, but I need you to understand why I needed space, why I still do." "We understand," my father said quickly. "You were going through a hard time and we were insensitive. We should have noticed something was wrong." It was exactly the kind of pat response I had expected, glossing over the deeper issues. "This isn't just about the past few months. It's about a lifetime of imbalance in our family. It's about how you've treated Zoe and me differently since we were children." "That's not true," my mother protested automatically. "It is true, and pretending otherwise won't help us move forward." I took a deep breath, centering myself as Dr. Reynolds had taught me. "I've prepared some things I need to say. I'd appreciate it if you would just listen without interrupting." They exchanged glances but nodded. "For as long as I can remember, there have been two sets of expectations in our family. Zoe was fragile and needed protection. I was strong and could handle anything. These weren't roles we chose. They were assigned to us and they shaped our entire lives." I went on to detail specific instances, patterns of behavior that had reinforced these roles year after year. The financial support given to Zoe but withheld from me. The emotional attention lavished on her while I was left to process feelings alone. The celebration of her minor achievements while my major ones were taken for granted. The result was that Zoe never learned real independence, while I never learned to ask for help. Both of us were harmed by this imbalance, just in different ways. My father started to speak, but my mother touched his arm, silencing him. "When I lost my job and apartment, I was too ashamed to tell you because I knew based on a lifetime of experience that your response would be disappointment, not support. I felt I had failed at the one thing you expected of me, handling everything on my own." I described the weeks living in my car, the constant fear, the deepening depression, the humiliation of finally accepting help from strangers because I couldn't ask for it from family. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, though I know you do. I'm telling you because if we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on truth, not the comfortable fictions we've all been living with." By the time I finished, my mother was crying openly and my father's eyes were suspiciously bright. A long silence followed, broken only by the ambient sounds of the restaurant around us. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rougher than usual. "I had no idea. None." He shook his head slowly. "I always thought we were doing right by both of you. Giving Zoe the support she seemed to need, respecting your independence because that seemed to be what you wanted." "I didn't want independence," I said quietly. "I needed it because I wasn't given another option." "Oh, Gemma." My mother reached across the table, stopping short of touching my hand. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner that night, going over and over it in my mind, about the honor roll and your graduation and all those other moments. You're right. We did take you for granted. We did expect more from you than from Zoe. I don't know why we fell into that pattern, but we did, and I'm so sorry." Her apology seemed genuine, but I had heard her apologies before, usually followed by a quick return to old behaviors. "I appreciate that, Mom. But what I need to know is whether anything will actually change, because I can't go back to the way things were." "What do you want from us?" my father asked, direct as always. "Honesty. Recognition of who I really am, not who you've decided I am. Respect for my boundaries. And most importantly, a willingness to examine your own behavior instead of getting defensive when I point out problems." My father nodded slowly. "Those seem like reasonable requests." "They're not requests, Dad. They're requirements for me to have a relationship with you going forward. My directness startled him, but after a moment he nodded again. Fair enough. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Where are you living now? Are you safe? Do you have a job? The questions were predictable, her way of trying to establish that I was okay so she could feel better. But for the first time I sensed genuine concern beneath the self-interest. I'm in a safe place. I have a good job. That's all I'm comfortable sharing right now. But when will we see you again? She pressed. When can we talk more? I don't know yet. This conversation was a first step, not a resolution. I need time to process, and I need to see evidence that you're both willing to change how you relate to me. My father, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke with unexpected vulnerability. I thought I was being a good father by treating you like an adult, by not hovering or interfering. I see now that I was just avoiding the harder parts of parenting. His voice cracked. I failed you, Gemma. Not just these past months, but for years. And I don't know if you can forgive that, but I hope someday you'll give me the chance to be the father you deserved. His admission, so unlike his usual stoic demeanor, caught me off guard. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I'd like that, Dad. But it will take time. My mother reached for my hand again, and this time I let her take it. Whatever you need, however long it takes. We'll wait. We'll do better. Just please don't disappear again. I made no promises, but I did agree to text them once a week to confirm I was okay. It wasn't the tearful reconciliation they might have hoped for, but it was honest. And for the first time in my relationship with my parents, honesty felt more important than harmony. As I walked away from the restaurant that evening, I felt different. Not healed, not whole, but perhaps on the way to becoming something new. Something authentic. I had faced my parents without either submitting to their narrative or attacking in anger. I had spoken my truth and set my boundaries. I had acted not from the script of the perfect daughter, but from the core of who I really was. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was just the beginning. 6 months after that dinner with my parents, I moved into my own apartment. It was smaller than my previous place in a less prestigious neighborhood, but it was mine, paid for with my own hard-earned money from my new job. The day I signed the lease, I felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any promotion or award I had ever received. Zoe helped me move in, carrying boxes and arranging furniture with surprising enthusiasm. Our months as roommates had transformed our relationship from distant competitors to genuine friends. We still disagreed, still irritated each other at times, but there was a foundation of trust and understanding that had never existed before. I'm going to miss having you around, she admitted as we collapsed onto my new couch after a day of moving. Who's going to force me to clean the bathroom now? I laughed. You're an adult. Figure it out. See, that's exactly what I'll miss. Your tough love. But we both knew our relationship wouldn't end with my move. We had established a tradition of weekly sister nights alternating between our apartments, watching bad reality television, and talking about everything from work, drama, to childhood memories re-examined through adult perspectives. My relationship with my parents was evolving more slowly. The weekly texts had expanded to occasional phone calls, carefully neutral at first, gradually becoming more meaningful. My mother was trying in her way to see me as I was, rather than as she had always defined me. My father was making efforts to engage with my life, asking questions about my work and actually listening to the answers. 2 months ago, I had invited them to my new apartment for dinner, the first time I had seen them in person since our restaurant meeting. It was awkward, with long silences and moments of tension, but also glimpses of something new. My father complimented my cooking without comparing it to Zoe's. My mother asked about my job without immediately changing the subject to family gossip. Small steps, but significant ones. The biggest change, however, was within myself. Therapy had helped me recognize patterns I had internalized from childhood: the compulsive self-reliance, the inability to ask for help, the constant need to prove my competence. I was learning to be vulnerable, to reach out when I needed support, to set boundaries without guilt. My experience with homelessness had stripped away the identity I had constructed around career success and financial stability. In losing everything, I had been forced to confront who I was beneath those external markers of worth. The journey back from that rock bottom had taught me resilience, but also the value of community. I began volunteering at New Beginnings once a month, bringing donations and helping women create resumes or prepare for interviews. I saw Lucia and Diane occasionally grateful for their role in my darkest moment. Officer Bryant and I had coffee once, an unexpected friendship born from her compassion on that rainy night. The shame I had felt about my period of homelessness gradually transformed into something else: a deep empathy for others in crisis, an understanding that circumstances can change for anyone, and a commitment to creating safety nets that I, by others, had lacked. My new job at Digital Edge was challenging but fulfilling. I had been promoted twice in 6 months. My experience and creativity valued in ways my previous employer had never recognized. The company culture encouraged work-life balance, a concept I was still learning to embrace after years of overwork. One unexpected outcome of my journey was finding community beyond family ties. I had joined a book club, made friends with neighbors in my building, reconnected with former colleagues. My world, which had once revolved entirely around work and obligatory family interactions, was expanding in ways that enriched and supported me. As for my parents, I was learning to see them not as the all-powerful figures of childhood, but as flawed humans who had done their best with the tools they had. Their best hadn't been good enough, had caused real harm that couldn't be erased with apologies. But understanding the roots of their behavior helped me separate from the pain without carrying bitterness forward. The process of rebuilding family relationships on new foundations was ongoing, with setbacks and progress in equal measure. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns, comparing me to Zoe or dismissing my feelings. My father still struggled to express emotion directly, but they were trying, and so was I. Last Sunday, I hosted a family dinner in my new apartment, not out of obligation, but because I chose to. Zoe brought dessert. My parents brought a housewarming gift, a set of cooking pots I had mentioned wanting. We ate, talked, laughed a little. There were moments of tension, old dynamics threatening to resurface, but also moments of genuine connection. As they were leaving, my father hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Gemma. Not for what you do, but for who you are." It was perhaps the first time he had expressed pride in me, without reference to achievement or capability. Just pride in my existence, my personhood. It wasn't everything, but it was something real. That night alone in my new home, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From perfect daughter, to homeless woman, to someone finding her own path. From a family built on assigned roles to relationships based on truth. From shame to self-acceptance. From isolation to connection. The healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. But I had found a way forward that honored both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. I had learned that rock bottom can become a foundation if you build upon it with intention and care. Most importantly, I had learned that families aren't fixed entities, unchangeable and eternal. They are living systems that can break, heal, transform. They can be rebuilt around truth rather than expectations. They can grow toward light like plants long kept in shadow. My name is Gemma, and I am 32 years old. I am not the perfect daughter. I am not the capable one. I am not defined by my strengths or my failures. I am simply myself, complex and worthy exactly as I am. And that I have finally realized is enough. Have you ever had to completely rebuild a relationship with a family member? What helped you move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Remember that asking for help is not weakness, but one of the bravest things you can do. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some comfort to anyone facing their own struggles with family expectations.